Back in August 2016, Josefina made the heartbreaking decision to terminate her pregnancy. Overwhelmed by shame and the realization of her misguided actions, she couldn't bear to move forward with the outcome of such a forbidden relationship with her father. Her courage to take this step came after her father had been arrested by the police. However, Josefina didn't escape the consequences of her choices entirely. She was sentenced to 100 days in jail for her involvement in the situation. Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into another shocking real-life story that truly highlights how complicated life can get. This time, the story comes straight from Talisay City, Philippines. The family is supposed to be the foundation of support and understanding, the space where love and care thrive. But sometimes, the cracks start to form from within, and the closest bonds are tested in unimaginable ways. So, what happened in this particular case? Let's unravel the full story together. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Spread the word far and wide. Now, let's get into it. This story starts with a man named Ricardo, born in 1946. He was the only boy in a family of 9 siblings, making him kind of a big deal. Being the 8th child, he ended up inheriting the most from his parents since he was considered the family's sole successor. Ricardo had an interesting life. He spent his younger years as a soldier, then worked as an electrician, and eventually became the captain of a fishing vessel. Because he was always at sea, finding time for a relationship was tough. But his friends eventually played matchmaker and introduced him to a woman named Milagrosa. She was passionate about nature and loved her freedom. The two hit it off and tied the knot in Mando City, Philippines, in 1984. Ricardo was 38, and Milagrosa was just 21. A pretty big age gap. A year after they got married, they welcomed a baby girl named Josefina, who grew up to be a real beauty. But Ricardo's job kept him away most of the time, as he was still sailing to provide for his family. Now, about Milagrosa, she wasn't the stay-at-home type. Her love for nature and adventure led her to join hiking groups, riverwalking communities, and even desert traveling enthusiasts. These folks were all about exploring the world in search of inner peace, often for months or even years at a time. They practiced yoga, meditated, and sometimes even fasted for weeks. To outsiders, they seemed pretty unconventional. Some might even say a little crazy. Most of them avoided meat, and Milagrosa fit right in. When Josefina was just 2 years old, Milagrosa left her with her mother in Lapu-Lapu City to go on one of her adventures. Meanwhile, Ricardo was still out at sea, and Josefina was left feeling like an orphan. By 1987, Ricardo was overwhelmed. He had no idea where Milagrosa was and felt lost trying to raise Josefina while managing his demanding job. Since he had to keep sailing, Josefina stayed with her grandmother, with Ricardo sending monthly money transfers. But he rarely saw his daughter. He thought providing financially was enough, but a child needs more than just money. In 1989, after years apart, Ricardo finally met Milagrosa again in a restaurant in Mando City. They decided to separate. It had been 4 years since they last saw each other, and now they were meeting just to sign divorce papers. Milagrosa promised to continue being part of Josefina's life, but she insisted that Ricardo keep up with the monthly support payments. As the years passed, Ricardo kept working at sea and stayed in touch with Josefina through phone calls and the occasional photo from her grandmother. He never remarried. His job didn't leave much time for romance. By 2003, after years of hard work and battling health issues like blurred vision and frequent illnesses, Ricardo finally retired at 57. With his significant savings, Ricardo finally left his official residence and moved back to his hometown in Talisay City, Philippines. He bought several hectares of land, planted vegetable and fruit gardens, and kept himself busy. The property was pretty big. He even had 4 workers helping him out. He still had plenty of money and continued sending monthly transfers to his daughter, Josefina, until she graduated from college in Mando City in 2010. After Josefina started working, she stopped asking for money. But even then, she never saw her father in person. From 1987 to 2010, their only contact was through phone calls or the occasional photo. Meanwhile, her mother, Milagrosa, had remarried to another nature lover, so they said. Fast forward to April 2015. Ricardo, now 69 years old, called his youngest sister, Carmencita, who was 66, and asked her to come to his house. He'd been bedridden for a month, limping and unable to move, with one of his legs constantly tingling. Worried, Carmencita and her son flew from Toledo to see him. When they arrived, they found Ricardo crying like a child, overcome with loneliness. Carmencita was shocked to find her brother in this state, especially since she knew that 2 years earlier, he'd remarried a 37-year-old woman named Antonia, who worked in his garden. What happened to that marriage? How could he be so lonely and alone in the house? Ricardo explained that he had kicked Antonia out after a huge fight. According to him, Antonia was useless. She didn't cook well, was slow, and couldn't read. She even went to the pharmacy once and brought back the wrong medicine. But the final straw for Ricardo came when he discovered that Antonia had undergone a hysterectomy years earlier due to health issues. For him, this was unacceptable. Antonia, on the other hand, thought Ricardo married her for companionship in his old age. After all, he was already 67 when they tied the knot. But apparently, Ricardo had hoped for children, which seemed odd considering his age. There were plenty of reasons behind their fights, but in the end, he sent her packing and began filing for divorce. Carmencita, however, didn't hold back her thoughts. She told her brother he should have known better. At his age and with his health failing, he should have kept Antonia around to take care of him. Instead, he called his sister, who lived far away, just to take him to the doctor. Carmencita even suggested he reconcile with Antonia, but Ricardo exploded with anger. He called her a disobedient sister, and dismissed her advice completely. After returning to Toledo, Carmencita and the other siblings kept urging Ricardo to reach out to his daughter, Josefina. They suggested she visit or even come to take care of him, maybe even bring her husband if she was married. It wasn't unreasonable. After all, Ricardo hadn't seen his daughter in 28 years. By now, Josefina was 30 years old, and it seemed like the right time for her to reconnect with her father. Ricardo had always been a responsible father. Despite being apart for so long, he never neglected his duty to support Josefina financially. He consistently sent money for her food, school, college, clothes, and even extras. Most of his years working at sea were dedicated to providing for her. After much discussion, Ricardo's siblings decided to call Josefina and let her know about her father's poor health. Josefina was stunned. She said that every time she spoke with her father, he always claimed to be healthy and strong, even forbidding her from visiting. He'd insisted she focus on her work as a painting gallery keeper. Still, she promised her aunts that she would visit him in Toledo City as soon as possible. In mid-July 2015, Josefina finally made the trip. She met her father at her grandmother's old house, and the reunion was deeply emotional. Ricardo apologized for being a burden to her and marveled at how much more beautiful she was in person than in her photos. During their time together, Josefina opened up about her struggles. Her life had been tough recently. She had just ended a relationship after discovering that her boyfriend had been married all along. On top of that, her attempt to open a sculpture gallery had backfired. She was scammed, leaving her in debt to the bank with high interest rates. Some of her friends, who had also invested in the gallery, blamed her and distanced themselves. To make matters worse, just 2 weeks before, her ex-boyfriend's wife had shown up at her apartment, causing a huge scene and publicly humiliating Josefina, even though she hadn't known he was married. She felt like a victim of lies and betrayal. This visit to her father's house couldn't have come at a better time. She needed a break from everything: her failed relationship, the financial mess, and the difficulties of talking to her mother Milagrosa, who had her own family now. Josefina decided not to think about her mother anymore and focused on reconnecting with her father. Ricardo was overjoyed, hugging his only daughter again and again. Over the following months, Ricardo encouraged Josefina to stay with him indefinitely. His health improved under her care, and he asked her to take charge of supervising the workers on his farm. He told her she would inherit all the land and that cultivating it could bring in more money than her gallery job ever could. He suggested using the farm's income to slowly pay off her debts to the bank and her friends. Josefina agreed and decided to stay, fulfilling her father's wishes and giving herself the chance to rebuild her life. Josefina loved sharing moments with her father on social media. Her posts were full of happy memories. Vacations abroad, walks in city parks, dinners at nice restaurants, everything looked picture perfect. Her father-daughter bonding moments even made her other relatives smile, glad to see their connection grow after so many years apart. But things took a shocking turn in May 2016. Carmencita, Ricardo's sister, decided to visit him again, this time bringing her son. She knew Josefina had been living with her father for almost 10 months, so she was excited to see how they were doing. When Carmencita arrived, she was stunned to see Josefina with a visibly pregnant belly. Confused, she immediately bombarded her niece with questions. "Are you married? If so, who's your husband? Is he someone from Tbilisi? Why didn't you invite him over? When's the wedding celebration?" Josefina froze, unable to answer. That's when Ricardo stepped in and dropped the bombshell. He and Josefina were married. Quietly, they had tied the knot 2 months earlier in a private church ceremony. At the time of their marriage, Josefina was already 5 months pregnant. Ricardo apologized to Carmencita and begged her not to tell anyone, not even their other siblings. He explained his reasoning. He desperately wanted a biological heir to take over his farming business. His previous marriage to Antonia hadn't worked out, and they'd never had children. After being apart from Josefina for 28 years, he felt a deep bond with her and saw this as a way to finally secure his legacy. But Carmencita was horrified. She couldn't wrap her mind around it. To her, it was incomprehensible. "You're her biological father," she cried. "This isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. That baby could be born with deformities." She was heartbroken and furious, spending much of her visit in tears. Carmencita demanded that Ricardo divorce Josefina immediately. She warned him that if he didn't end the relationship, she wouldn't hesitate to contact their 2 surviving siblings and even file a police report. Over the past few weeks, Milagrosa had been seeing photos of Josefina and her father on social media. She'd even messaged them a few times, saying how much she missed them. Then, on June 19, 2016, she decided to visit Ricardo's home, the place she hadn't set foot in since Josefina was just a few months old. That was back when Ricardo was still preparing to leave for his life at sea. Her arrival wasn't exactly met with open arms. Ricardo wasn't happy to see her, not in the least. Things only got more tense when Milagrosa started prying, asking about Josefina's husband and why she, as Josefina's mother, hadn't been invited to the wedding. Soon, the real reason for her visit came out. Milagrosa confessed that she needed money. Her new husband's business had gone bankrupt, and he was drowning in debt. She asked Ricardo for a significant amount of money, saying it would help them get back on their feet. If he didn't want to give it outright, she asked to borrow it, promising to pay him back when they had the funds. Ricardo flat out refused and told her to leave. That's when Milagrosa's tone shifted. She began hurling insults, claiming Josefina's pregnancy was disgusting and implying she knew it was her father's child. Her words turned even uglier as she brought up Josefina's past, accusing her of being a homewrecker who had stolen another woman's husband and a scammer who'd taken her friend's money for a failed business. Milagrosa didn't stop there. She went on about how Josefina had ruined her reputation in Mando City, saying that was why she'd run away to her father's house, to escape the trail of her own misdeeds. Josefina couldn't handle the verbal assault. She sat on the sofa, covering her face, crying out in anguish as her mother's cruel words kept coming. Suddenly, Ricardo emerged from his room, holding a gun. Without hesitation, he fired at Milagrosa, again and again. Even as she fell to the floor, he kept pulling the trigger, the bullets echoing against the cold blue tiles. He showed no remorse, no hesitation, as if he was taking pleasure in her destruction. Milagrosa, just 53 years old, took her last breath there on the floor. From the police investigation, it was confirmed that Ricardo's firearm was legally owned. He had all the proper documents, and he'd had it for years, back from when he was still working at sea. However, the reason he acted so desperately that day wasn't just because of the hateful insults Milagrosa threw at Josefina. It ran much deeper than that. Ricardo had been carrying a grudge against Milagrosa for decades. Their problems started just a few months after they got married. When Milagrosa became pregnant, she began arguing about wanting to abort the baby. Her reason: she wanted to live freely in the wild with her community and didn't want to be tied down by anyone, not even her child. Ricardo had fought to hold everything together. After Josefina was born and he went back to sea, Milagrosa left the baby behind to be raised by her mother. She never asked how Josefina was doing, never visited, never even held her daughter or fed her. Thankfully, Josefina's grandmother adored her and took excellent care of her, using the money Ricardo sent every month. But Milagrosa's neglect didn't stop there. Even when Josefina was in high school, Milagrosa showed up, not to reconnect or embrace her daughter, but to announce she had remarried and was moving in with her new husband and stepchildren. Josefina was left out of her life entirely. To make matters worse, Milagrosa had reportedly been taking portions of the money Ricardo sent for Josefina's care and using it for herself and her new family. Josefina grew to despise her mother. Anytime she tried to open up about her struggles, Milagrosa dismissed her, making it clear she didn't care. According to Ricardo's lawyer, the shooting wasn't premeditated or intentional. Milagrosa hadn't been to Ricardo's house in years, and when she showed up, it was to demand money. Legally, she wasn't entitled to anything, but that didn't stop her from insisting. When Ricardo refused, she lashed out, insulting both him and Josefina in the most vicious way possible. In court, Ricardo's sister, Carmencita, testified about the years of pain her brother had endured. She shared how Ricardo, while working at sea, once nearly jumped overboard after learning Milagrosa wanted a divorce and that Josefina refused to talk to him on the phone anymore because he never came home. Even after he retired, Ricardo hesitated to reconnect with Josefina. He was overwhelmed with shame. He felt he had failed as a father, believing he didn't deserve to be part of her life. He also worried that Milagrosa had poisoned Josefina's view of him, making him even more reluctant to reach out. Despite all this, one thing never changed: Ricardo's commitment to financially support his daughter. He continued sending money without fail, knowing it was his responsibility, regardless of the emotional distance between them. In August 2016, overwhelmed by shame and regret, Josefina decided to terminate her pregnancy. With her father under arrest, she began to see things more clearly and realized how deeply wrong her actions had been. She couldn't believe she'd allowed herself to get caught up in such a terrible relationship. However, her decision to abort the baby came with consequences. She was sentenced to 100 days in jail for the act. On November 5, 2016, under pressure from her aunt Carmencita, Josefina officially divorced her father. The case drew a lot of attention, and the regional high court in Talisiri handed down a harsh sentence for Ricardo. At 70 years old, he was given a life sentence for the murder of his ex-wife, Milagrosa. Additionally, both Ricardo and Josefina faced extra charges for falsifying documents that claimed they were not biologically related. These fraudulent papers had been presented to the priest and civil officer during their marriage. Both were given an additional 2 years in prison for their misconduct. Josefina, however, was released early in September 2017 after serving just 10 months of her sentence. Her early release was due to her good behavior and contributions while in prison. Unfortunately, Ricardo wasn't as fortunate. During the pandemic, his health deteriorated rapidly. On July 16, 2020, he passed away in prison at the age of 73 from complications related to his illness. After her release, Josefina moved in with her aunt Carmencita, who provided her with support and stability. Eventually, Josefina rebuilt her life and married another man, starting a new chapter in the city of Toledo. What lessons can we learn from this story?